took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what
she had done, gave her father 41.
Thursday, August 4th, 1892. The quiet town of Fall River, Massachusetts was shaken by a horrifying crime. Andrew Borden and his wife, Abby, were found brutally murdered, each struck multiple times with an axe. At first, no one knew who could have done such a thing. But before long, suspicion turned toward Andrew's 32-year-old daughter, Lizzie Borden. She was a Sunday school teacher, unmarried, and came from a wealthy, respected family. Hardly the kind of person anyone expected to be a serial killer. Still, her story kept changing, and police couldn't find anyone else who might have had a motive. Lizzie never confessed, but when she went on trial in 1893, the entire country was glued to the case. And when she was eventually found not guilty, the verdict only deepened the mystery. Did Lizzie Borden really kill her father and stepmother? And if not, who did? This is the real story behind the monster, Lizzie Borden.
Nightmare Files.
August 4th, 1892 began like any other summer morning at the Borden house. Their maid, Bridget Sullivan, served breakfast to Andrew and Abby, while Lizzie slept upstairs. After breakfast, Andrew left for town, and Abby went upstairs to clean the guest room, where Lizzie's uncle had stayed the night before. On the surface, the Bordens, they seemed like a perfect upper-class family. Andrew had built his fortune through real estate, and his daughters, Lizzie and Emma, were known as polite and deeply religious people. But things weren't as perfect as they looked. Lizzie and Emma didn't like their stepmother, Abby, and tensions in the home had been growing for months. Lizzie also hated that they lived in a less fashionable part of town, despite their wealth. That August, the summer heat was brutal and everyone in the house had been feeling sick, possibly from spoiled food. But by the morning of the 4th, everyone except the maid seemed better. Sometime after Andrew left for town, Abby went upstairs to tidy the guest room. What she didn't know was that someone was following her. When Andrew returned home later that morning, Lizzie told him that Abby had gone out to visit a sick friend after receiving a note. Believing her, Andrew sat down to rest on the living room sofa. The maid, Bridget, went upstairs to lie down, still feeling ill. Moments later, she woke up to the sound of Lizzie screaming. Lizzie called out that her father was dead. Panicked, Bridget ran for help while neighbors rushed over. The scene inside was gruesome. Andrew Borden was slumped on the couch, his face covered in blood. One of his eyes had been split in half, and his nose was nearly gone. No one knew where Abby was. Lizzie repeated the story about the note and her stepmother visiting a sick friend, but when Bridget returned with the local doctor, Seabury Bowen, she went upstairs and found Abby's body laying face down on the floor of the guest room. She'd been struck 19 times with a hatchet. The blood had already dried and darkened, which meant Abby had been killed hours before her husband. Whoever did it had managed to hide inside the house until Andrew returned, an idea that didn't sit right with the investigators. At first, police didn't suspect Lizzie. She was quiet, religious, and from a respected family. She claimed she had been in the barn looking for a piece of iron when the murders happened. Investigators instead blamed a man, possibly an outsider or a foreigner. They even arrested an innocent Portuguese laborer before realizing they were wrong. Then inconsistencies with Lizzie's story began to surface. One moment, she said she was in the barn. The next, she said she was eating pears in the loft. No bloody clothing was ever found, but she couldn't explain where her stepmother's mysterious note had gone. She told a friend that Abby might have burned it by accident. Things got worse when police learned Lizzie had tried to buy prussic acid, a deadly poison, from a local pharmacy the day before the murders. She needed to clean a fur cape, but the pharmacist refused to sell. Then, just days after the murders, Lizzie's friend, Alice Russell, saw her burning a dress in the stove. Lizzie said it was ruined and covered in paint, but it was too suspicious to ignore. On August 8th, Lizzie gave confusing, contradictory answers at her inquest hearing. 3 days later, she was arrested. Lizzie's trial began in 1893 and immediately became a national sensation. Newspapers called it the Great Trial. Crowds packed in the courtroom, eager to see whether the prim Sunday school teacher had really killed her parents. Lizzie didn't testify, but she still made headlines, especially when she fainted at the sight of her father's skull being presented as evidence. Her lawyers argued that the killer would have been soaked in blood, but Lizzie's clothes were spotless. Some have even theorized she may have committed the murders naked, then cleaned herself before calling for help. Witnesses claimed that they seen strangers near the Borden property that day, and others supported parts of Lizzie's alibi. Meanwhile, the prosecution struggled to prove motive or physical evidence. On June 19, 1893, the jury found Lizzie Borden not guilty. Afterward, she and her sister Emma inherited their father's estate and moved into a large home in a nicer part of Fall River, the kind of house Lizzie had always wanted. For a while, the sisters lived together quietly, but in 1904, Lizzie befriended an actress named Nance O'Neill, and rumors swirled that the two were more than just friends. Emma disapproved and moved out 2 years later. Lizzie, now calling herself Lizbeth, lived the rest of her life in seclusion. She died in 1927 at age 67, never revealing what really happened that day in 1892. To this day, no one knows for sure who killed Andrew and Abby Borden. Some believe Lizzie did it. Others think her sister, Emma, was involved, or that an illegitimate half-brother named William committed the crime. When Lizzie's lawyer's journals were discovered in 2012, they revealed that he saw her as an emotional and grief-stricken, not cold and unfeeling, but even those notes couldn't solve the mystery. Over a century later, the case still haunts American history, and there's an old nursery rhyme that keeps it alive. This was the true story behind the monster, Lizzie Borden.
Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what
She had done, gave her father 41.
Nightmare Files.